Every golf instructor from the 1990s onward taught some version of the same idea. Turn your shoulders as far as you can, keep your hips quiet, and the bigger that gap between them, the more power you'll generate. The concept had a name, the X Factor, and the player everyone pointed to as proof was Tiger Woods. The instructor who popularized the X Factor never actually said every golfer should restrict their hips to get one. Jim McLean introduced the concept in Golf magazine in December of 1992, after comparing 5 of the longest hitters on the PGA Tour to 5 of the shortest. The long hitters averaged a 38-degree difference between how far their shoulders turned and how far their hips turned at the top of the backswing. The short hitters averaged 24 degrees. That 14-degree gap became one of the most influential numbers in golf instruction history. Tiger arrived with a swing that seemed to demonstrate the theory in real time. By some analysts' video estimates, his shoulder turn reached roughly 100 degrees against a hip turn closer to 35, a separation of around 65 degrees. It was large, visible, and easy to show on camera, and for an entire generation of coaches, Tiger's swing became the illustration for McLean's research. Bigger X factor equals more power isn't quite what the science says though, and it isn't entirely what McLean's own later work said either. McLean originally measured the X factor at the top of the backswing, the moment the shoulders finished turning back. Biomechanist Phil Cheatham, whose motion capture work has become close to a standard in golf research, found that the real peak separation between hips and shoulders doesn't happen there. It happens after the downswing has already started, somewhere between 1 and 18% into it. Cheatham called this the X factor stretch. The hips begin rotating toward the target while the shoulders are still finishing their turn away from it, loading the torso muscles the way a rubber band loads before it snaps back, a pattern biomechanists describe as a stretch shortening cycle. The angle at the top of the backswing was never the whole story. The timing of what happens a fraction of a second later matters just as much, maybe more. The instruction to restrict the hips ran into public disagreement from other respected teachers. Instructor Kip Putterbaugh argued that the original model, minimal hip turn, maximum shoulder turn, Tiger as a template, was flawed, and that most golfers would be better served turning their hips as freely as Jack Nicklaus did, an approach he called the anti-X factor. McLean pushed back, calling that characterization of his idea, in his words, a joke. Jim Flick, who coached Nicklaus starting in 1990, added that Nicklaus never consciously restricted his hip turn at all. He let his hips react naturally to the swinging of his arms, and the amount of turn changed depending on which club he had in his hands. Two well-regarded instructors were pointing to two tour legends as proof, arguing about a concept whose own definition biomechanists were still refining. A 2022 review of 92 published studies on golf swing biomechanics found that researchers still don't fully agree on how to measure the X factor or the kinematic sequence that follows it, and that disagreement has produced contradictory results across 3 decades of research. What the review did find consistent is that elite golfers show a greater increase in torso-pelvic separation early in the downswing than amateurs do. The pattern is real. It's the simplified version, get a bigger angle, restrict the hips, the yards will follow, that oversells what the data supports. Tiger's influence on the physics of the swing shows up somewhere most viewers don't think to look: the golf ball. In late 2025, Golf Digest rebuilt Tiger's actual 2000-era driver, a 7.5-degree, 43.5-inch steel-shafted Titleist 975D, and ran it through robot testing at golf laboratories using his period-correct golf ball. That setup produced a launch angle of 9.9 degrees, a spin rate of 3,214 RPM, and a carry of 292.1 yards. Testers then swapped in the ball Tiger switched to right at the height of his 2000 and 2001 major run, an early Titleist Pro V1, without changing the swing or the driver at all. Launch angle slightly climbed to 10.6 degrees, spin dropped by nearly 700 RPM to 2,532, and distance rose to 309 yards, 17 extra yards from the ball alone. Giving that same swing input a modern driver and a modern ball pushed ball speed to 173.5 miles per hour, dropped spin again to 2,093 RPM, and brought total distance to 330.8 yards. The swing never changed, the launch conditions did, and the difference was nearly 40 yards. That's the part of the story most golfers overlook when they credit Tiger's power to athleticism alone. Much of what changed after his arrival wasn't how hard players swung, but how efficiently that swing speed converted into distance through higher launch and lower spin. Tiger's own numbers reflect this too. He averaged 298 yards in his dominant 2000 season, using equipment that looks primitive by current tour standards. Across the broader PGA Tour, average clubhead speed rose from around 104 miles per hour in 1980 to well over 114 miles per hour by the late 2010s, and average driving distance climbed from roughly 257 yards to nearly 300. Some of that gain came from faster swings. A meaningful share of it came from engineers giving the same swing speed a better return, exactly what the robot test showed. None of this means the concept behind the X factor was wrong, or that Tiger's swing wasn't a genuinely elite piece of biomechanics. It means the lesson many golfers took from watching him, restrict the hips, chase the largest possible gap, and the distance will follow, simplified research that was, and still is, more nuanced than a single number on a launch monitor. Finding this in your own swing doesn't require standing in front of a mirror measuring shoulder turn against hip turn. It helps to notice the transition instead, that instant at the top of the backswing where the lower body starts moving toward the target before the upper body has finished turning away from it. That's the stretch the research keeps pointing to, and it's something you can feel on the range long before you'll ever stand in front of a launch monitor. The X factor didn't make Tiger a great golfer, and it isn't the reason the modern game hits the ball so much farther than it did in 1980. It's one piece of a larger, still unfinished picture, and the next piece of that picture is sitting in the dimples of the ball being played right now. More golf science every week.